Great. So hopefully everyone can see my screen, and as Jason mentioned, if you have any issues, try rejoining, and hopefully that will sort it out. So thank you for having me today. My name is Lili Davoudian, and I'm a senior product manager on the Microsoft Defender for Cloud team. I'm really excited to share some updates that we've released in the Microsoft Sentinel Zero Trust TIC 3.0 solution, and I'll share a quick demo with all of you as well. Throughout the session, please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat. I'll try to answer them throughout, and if not, we have ample time at the end for questions. So Zero Trust has gained a lot of ground and traction in light of recent executive orders in this space, in light of the recent surge towards work from home, and we found that Zero Trust has gotten so broad that we have really an entire industry in this space. The solution that we've built is a hybrid. It's a cross between Microsoft Zero Trust principles and a US government framework, TIC, or Trusted Internet Connections 3.0, that was developed out of the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. TIC 3.0 really focuses on the competing demands of security and flexibility. The federal agencies want to be able to have visibility and insights into how their teams are accessing their networks, what devices they're on, but they also want to give them that flexibility as we see threats evolving, as we see technologies evolve, as we see the surge in work from home. And so TIC 3.0 is really an attempt to balance this. And we mirror that and map it to our internal Zero Trust architecture. This slide really talks about Microsoft's Zero Trust architecture, some of our guiding principles, and how the environment looks, which I'm sure everyone is somewhat familiar with. But our three main principles, which are at the top, are verify explicitly, which means that we're always authenticating and authorizing based on the data points that we have, your user identity, the location, the device health, the data classification, and more. We also are really focused on least privilege. We want to make sure that we're using things like just-in-time access to limit user access. We're thinking about risk-based policies that are adaptive. We're thinking about data classification and protection to make sure that we're securing our data, but also empowering employees and individuals to work productively. Finally, we assume breach. And really the point of this is to minimize our blast radius, to segment access, and to make sure that we're driving threat detection, we're getting that needed visibility, and we're improving our defenses to minimize lateral movement and the blast radius there. So we've seen a really big surge in Zero Trust at Microsoft. This started with the shift to remote work in light of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. In that month alone, we saw a over 50% increase in use of Microsoft's MFA services, a large part due to really unprecedented levels of working from home. And we took that as a sign that customers were starting to adopt Zero Trust models and that this was something of interest to our user community. In light of how Microsoft has shifted to work from home, what we've seen with our customers, we really want to make sure that we're empowering all of the end users to really safely embrace the hybrid workplace. So Zero Trust architecture helps us ensure productivity, and it empowers your users to work more securely regardless of where they may be, regardless of what devices they may be using. And it also provides risk mitigation. We help close security gaps, we minimize the risk of lateral movement, and we make sure that we're monitoring users and devices regardless of where they may be. So when we think about Zero Trust, there are a few different pillars of interest. So we're really hyper-focused on identity and devices, making sure that they're verified and secure using authentication to give employees that flexibility. When we think about endpoints and understanding compliance and health of our devices, this becomes super important. We're also focused on apps and the shadow IT that they may create. Data is increasingly important. We want to be able to classify it, to label it based on sensitivity, to understand, encrypt, and restrict it appropriately. We also think about the infrastructure that's hosting our data and how we can build a baseline to understand normal and risky behavior. And then most importantly, we're no longer assuming that just because a device or a user is on a network that they're trusted. We're thinking about limiting access, real-time threat detection, encryption, and more. So as we started to talk to customers and realize that Zero Trust really is top of mind, we also found that it was a bit overwhelming. There are a lot of pillars to think about. We have these 3 principles, and we wanted to build a solution that would serve as a really good starting point to give both visibility and hardening from one pane of glass. And that's really what we've built today. So we also spoke with a lot of government customers who were following the TIC 3.0 framework. And in doing so, we felt like this is something that's really applicable regardless of industry. It provides a really good way to make Zero Trust more comprehensive. And so we've taken some of those insights and done a mapping. And really the point here is to make sure that we're assessing your security posture in your environment in a holistic way and thinking about threats and visibility across the board. So before I jump into the solution, I want to just talk a little bit about the Microsoft compliance ecosystem, because if you're familiar with our products or you're using them today, you're aware that we have a host of different offerings that can help you understand compliance. The Service Trust Portal, to start, really talks about how we're implementing controls and processes to protect our cloud services and protect the customer data that we're housing there. M365 Compliance Manager is a great way for customers to think about how they can meet policy and regulatory compliance initiatives, and in doing so, really reduce risk. So through Compliance Manager, you can use that as a starting point and really enable different initiatives, look at the assessments, look at the recommended actions, and use that as a launching pad. Defender for Cloud hosts a host of regulatory compliance frameworks. Customers are probably most familiar with Azure Security Benchmark, which is our built-in initiative for evaluating your cloud workloads. Here, you can quickly understand your security posture, get that visibility, but also get actions to harden your attack surface and minimize the likelihood of threats. And then finally, we bring this all together with Microsoft Sentinel. We stream our telemetry to Sentinel and get that over time holistic view of your security posture. We use the continuous monitoring to understand gaps, and we can remediate all from one pane of glass. And this is where our workbook is housed. So we initially released this offering over a year ago, and it started as a Sentinel workbook. We since then have used a lot of community feedback to expand this to a full-featured offering. We have added analytics rules for monitoring and reporting, and we also have added some SOAR capabilities like a playbook to help drive those automated, consistent responses. And really what we've built here is a turnkey offering that will help you build, design, implement, monitor, and respond to a Zero Trust architecture. This is the 3rd iteration of this solution. I'll show in the demo how you can have a look to see if you have the most recent one. In Sentinel, we have kind of color-coded tiles for if you need an update or if you're deploying it for the first time. So we'll share that. But I really want to highlight that the majority of the changes that we've made have come from feedback from the user community. You all have really helped us think about what's going well, what we can improve, and we're really grateful for that constant feedback. We have a survey in the tool that I'll show directly in the demo. We read every piece of feedback in there. The majority of it is incorporated. I'll run through kind of a step-by-step of what we've added, and I'm sure many of you may recognize things that you had requested that we've put in. So we're always using that feedback to drive improvements to the product, and we're really grateful for this community. Another thing that I'm personally very excited about is some of the improvements that we've made with the Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Sentinel integration. Defender for Cloud really is what gives us the ability to have visibility and remediation all from one pane of glass. It allows us to get secure and stay secure over time. And due to some enhancements that we've made in the Better Together story, the product is all the better. And I'm really excited to show that in the demo. The solution benefits are listed here. If you've been using it, hopefully they speak for themselves. A big win theme for us is the large audience that can benefit from this solution. So we see it being a great starting point for visibility. So when you're thinking about designing and building your posture and understanding where you stand relative to zero trust principles, the workbook is a great place for implementers and for assessors to come in and understand across your Microsoft, on-prem, third-party, cross-cloud, multi-cloud environment, what does your posture look like? So that's a huge win for us. And then we also have analytics rules and playbooks that can help you respond and harden your attack surface where we do see gaps. We have a print to PDF feature that helps you really easily export any of these insights into a PDF that you can build into your roadmap. You can share with decision makers. So a lot of different personas who can benefit here. I also want to highlight, if maybe this is your first time looking at the workbook, that we have a very, very strong third-party story. So we've built this solution first and foremost to help customers understand their posture relative to zero trust frameworks. We want to make sure this is something you can use whether you're fully in Azure, whether you're partially in Azure, maybe most of your footprint is on-prem or in third-party tooling. All of that is okay. We want to enable functionality across Microsoft and our third-party ecosystem, and we've made some changes to make that even more seamless that I'll show in the What's New slide. Last thing I'll say here is we really have built in a lot of responses so that we're not only giving you the visibility, but we're also giving you responses on how to close those gaps where we can. We've built in automation, and we want to take this one step further than just evaluating your posture into giving tools and that toolbox to respond and remediate all within one pane of glass. So the solution content has 3 parts. So the first is the workbook, which has been there throughout all iterations and that we've really just made better over time. This is a visualization built in Sentinel that helps you do the design and build. It's the place to get started. Using Cousteau query language, we have built over 200 visualizations that can be customized for reporting. So you can look across one subscription, you can look across all of your tenants, multi-cloud, cross-cloud, as I mentioned. So this is very customizable. We want customers to come in and make it very easy to use. And I'll show that through just the parameters at the top in the demo. This is really helpful for SOC players, for your compliance teams to get that initial visibility. Once you see your posture relative to the zero trust framework, we understand that you'll probably want to have some alerting or some monitoring over time. We know that there are more threats than ever. The landscape is evolving, and we have a very heavy load on security teams. And so we have tried to automate what we can. Here, rather than expecting your teams to be eyes to glass in Sentinel looking at this workbook, we've built in an automation that basically says, if your posture falls below a certain %, which can be customized, send an email and let me know so that I can come in and remediate. Again, we're doing all of the continuous monitoring on the back end on your behalf, and we're letting you know where we see a deviation or where you need to come in and fix a misconfiguration. And then we've built in additional responses, again, just to minimize time that your security professionals are spending in the tool. We want to build these consistent responses and automate what we can. We have created some automations here to either open a ServiceNow ticket, a Jira ticket, an Azure DevOps ticket, and really be able to alert the appropriate teams that, hey, there's a misconfiguration relative to a zero trust control. Please go into Defender for Cloud and fix it. Again, so your security teams can focus on what's important and not have to be eyes to glass in this workbook in Sentinel at all times. The solution is really based off of control cards. And this is an example of a control card. I'll show more in the demo. Anything that is light blue that you can see here means it's a deep link. So at Microsoft, we have a very robust documentation store, which customers definitely take advantage of, but occasionally can have a difficult time finding the right documentation. And so We've linked everything here. So let's say you jump into this control card. We show you what recommended log sources you can enable to meet the control. We link you to docs that help you implement everything required for that control. And we'll also link the relevant Microsoft portals. Even we at Microsoft have difficulty remembering all of the different portal names. So we've brought that in here just for ease of use. For customers who are interested in the alignment with NIST, we also loop that in here. So again, we're really trying to create these uniform control cards across the offering and make it easy to navigate throughout the workbook. I am seeing some comments in the chat about the size of the slides, so sorry if it's a bit zoomed out. I'm on a bigger monitor than normal. We will share the slides after the fact, and also in the demo, I'll go through some of these more zoomed in, so hopefully it will be easy to see. So before we jump into the demo, I want to quickly walk through what's new. Really excited about this content again, because the majority of it is based on feedback from this community, what works, what we can do better. And so hopefully you'll all see some of the things that you've asked for throughout our new features. So the first one is deeper visibility into vulnerability management. Here we're using Microsoft Defender for Cloud to assess the endpoint. And when you see a vulnerability, we're sharing a lot of additional data and context on the asset that you can click in and explore. So here you can drill down and look at this information further, you can investigate, or you can share it with a decision maker or the appropriate audience. So anything, again, that's a light blue link means it's clickable. So here, if you see that maybe there are patches or other action that you need to take on a resource, you can deep dive directly into that resource and make the changes. We also have added in some SOAR functionality. This is really the incident response-based component. These automations, again, are there to help minimize the load on your security team and to build consistent, repeatable processes around actions that your teams are taking frequently. We use metrics to understand which automations you're using the most frequently and how efficient they are, and these are automatically configured into the offering. So earlier I spoke a little bit about the pillars of Zero Trust, and identity is a big one. Conditional access is a large component of the identity pillar, but beyond just implementing conditional access and walking away, we want to be able to help you monitor it. And we use the rich telemetry that we gather in Sentinel to do that. So let's say we know that conditional access is enabled. We're using the data to better understand what policies are executing, how frequently, which apps are being accessed. And this helps you not only understand trends and your baseline, but also blind spots, what's not being covered, what's out of your expectations. And so we're taking conditional access, which is fairly commonly implemented across customers looking to align better to Zero Trust, and just taking it that one step further. As I mentioned, we're really interested in protecting your entire ecosystem, regardless of whether or not the resources sit in Azure. And we heard from a lot of customers that they're bringing in third-party tooling. Maybe they're using CrowdStrike instead of MDE, and they want to easily integrate that into this solution. If you're familiar with Sentinel, you're aware that Sentinel aggregates your events into an alert. And when that alert triggers, it becomes an incident. What we've done is have used security incidents so that all of your third-party alerting will populate here without you having to worry about setting up additional configurations. So you can navigate directly to the incident from this workbook. Again, this is a blue click, so it's a deep link. All from this single pane of glass, you can navigate to that incident without having to authenticate or move outside of the workbook. So we really just added this to have a smoother experience around integrating the Azure tooling with your third-party suite of products. So as I mentioned, identity is a key pillar of Zero Trust. we want to be able to add additional insights and pivots into the user profile, which can help provide context around alerting. Let's say that you have suspicious activity from one of your users. If you jump into their profile and you see they're on the red team, that's a bit of a different story than if you go to their profile and they're on the sales team. So again, we're bringing in the Azure Active Directory logging, using that user profile to better build context and really enrich the data that we have. So system baselining is a very cool Defender for Cloud feature that you might be aware of. Essentially, it's evaluating your endpoints and creating a security baseline. If we see things that are either weak or vulnerable, we'll recommend that you make a change. This is an example of the really rich Better Together XDR story that we have between Defender for Cloud and Sentinel. And so this is a great way that you can understand your endpoints and try and close some of the gaps. We bring all of these insights into a very easy interface that allows you to action it directly, but we also will allow you to pivot directly into the raw logs if you want to do further investigation or response that way. As I mentioned, again, with Defender for Cloud, that is how we do the remediation and we close some of the security gaps that we're finding. So here you'll see that through the integration, we see recommendations that need to be addressed. We can deep link directly to the recommendation in Defender for Cloud and make the changes. Depending on RBAC, it's possible that your monitoring teams may not be able to make the changes. Even if that's the case, we can build in automation to via ServiceNow, via Jira, via Azure DevOps, ticket the appropriate teams and make sure that the configurations are fixed. Another great feature that we've added, which is based on community feedback, is asset inventory. This is based on Azure Resource Graph data, and it inventories your assets because at the end of the day, we want to give you a read of everything you have from APIs, VMs, managed identities, so that you can know what's in your environment and therefore defend it. You can't control what you're not aware of, and this helps you better understand your entire portfolio. We have deep links to all of the assets, and that way you can have a look at them, alter the configurations as needed, and just making sure that you have a good comprehensive understanding of your environment and you're securing everything accordingly. We also heard from customers that they want to be able to add free text notes in the control card. This was helpful for referencing different configurations, for showing to security leadership, for making a plan of action. And so we've added a very easy to use field at the bottom of control cards that allow you to just add in any notes that may be relevant. When you use our print to PDF feature, it will retain all of these insights and you can easily share that with auditors or with decision makers. We've also incorporated the Microsoft Defender for Cloud network map. Network map is really a visualization of all of your network interactions. It shows the VMs in your network, which components they're working through, how they're using identity, and all of that. Where you see these red exclamation points, that means that there are security recommendations that you need to take to harden your posture and minimize your attack surface, and you can do that directly from the workbook as well. Last but not least, we've added geolocation enhancement. So this is another part of our integration with Azure Active Directory. This is a map-based visualization that basically correlates Azure Information Protection and Azure Active Directory so that you can see where people are accessing your sensitive data. Again, this helps you just create that deeper understanding both of context of how your environment is working, and you can see if this is something that makes sense for your organization and for how your employees may be working and where they may be. So as you can see, we've released a lot of new features for this solution, and we are again very grateful for the community feedback that has helped us mature this over time. This is the third iteration of this solution, and we're excited to see where this goes next. So with that, I'm going to transition to the kind of demo-based component, and we'll start with a control card, which is network access control. So I I understand the slides are a bit small today, so I will show this again in the demo at larger font, but just bear with me for now. The control card is really there, again, for the build design phase. We have deep links to understand the TIC requirements. We have the smart card of Microsoft references, which is really everything that you need to deploy the control. And the goal here is to save time for your teams and to save the need to do all that research. And we've just surfaced the best practices here. We also have recommended logs. We've provided the product page for each of these capabilities, and you can always bring in your third-party tooling. And finally, we have the portals, and that's just for ease of navigation, as I mentioned earlier. So once you've set up your network and your firewalls, you want to assess it over time. And you will use the Microsoft Defender for Cloud policy-based assessments to understand your posture over time that you can see here. When we see these misconfigurations or gaps, we'll also want to be able to respond and to remediate. As I mentioned, we don't want to have to live in the workbook. And so we've built these alerting rules where you can see if your posture has changed, and we'll let you know either via sending you an email, we can post on Teams, and that way you can jump into the link and do the remediation directly rather, again, than having to be in the portal. We've also built these playbooks that can open the relevant ticket for folks on Jira, ServiceNow, Azure DevOps, so that they can do the remediation if needed. So with that, I'm going to pivot to the demo and try and increase the size so that this is a bit easier for everyone to read, because I know this is a larger monitor. So let's zoom in a bit, and hopefully this is better. So this is the workbook in Microsoft Sentinel. As I mentioned, this is the newer iteration of it. We have perimeter-based filtering at the top, and this will help you look at either multiple subscriptions or workspaces or just one, and you can also filter the time range, and that will modify all of the panels below. If it's your first time in the workbook, I would really recommend turning on the guide and looking at the Getting Started tools. We get a lot of customer feedback about turning on the workbook for the first time. And so if you are having any issues, would really recommend starting with Getting Started, because that should answer the majority of your questions. Anytime we have new insights from customers, we try and include it here. It will help you understand the roles that you need, the onboarding prerequisites, and all of that. The tooling required for this is Microsoft Sentinel and Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Anything else is an enrichment. We have recommended enrichments here that you'll see, but none of this is required. And again, you can always bring in your third-party tooling. So I'm going to turn this off. We also have added some blogs and other demos that we've done around this solution. So if you're coming in for the first time, those are two great references just to learn more. So scrolling down here, I shared previously a networking use case. I understand the font was quite small, so let's have another look at that together here. Hopefully this is a bit better and everyone can see. So here you have the control card. Because I'm quite zoomed in, you can't see the full thing, but I'll walk through it. We have hundreds of control cards in the workbook. And at the top, we have the link to the TIC documentation. So if this is something that you're not familiar with, you can have a look at the TIC guidance and learn more. As I've mentioned, we also bring in the recommended logs and what you need to do to align to this control. You can see all of that here. We also have the Microsoft Defender for Cloud recommendations. This is the telemetry that helps us understand over time how we're doing, and possibly if there are any steps that I need to take to harden my attack surface. So here I see all of the Microsoft Defender for Cloud recommendations. I can jump into the logs if I want a more detailed view, and then I can also do the remediation directly. I'm just going to zoom out to show that. Zoom out a bit more. So there's a blue deep link here for remediation. So let's say I look at this recommendation that says, management ports should be protected with JIT. if that's something I decide I want to action, I can hit the remediate deep link. I can see all of the unhealthy resources. If I have permissions, I can fix it directly. And if not, I can assign it to the appropriate team. You'll note that all of that was done within the workbook, and I can one-click back into the workbook. There's no need for additional authentication or anything like that. So we really do have that visibility and remediation all from the single pane of glass. The other thing I want to show here, I'm just going to zoom in a bit more, possibly overcompensating from earlier, but we also have the notes that I mentioned. Where if you want to come in and add your plan of action and milestones, if you just want to add any thoughts about the configurations or the JIT access, you can add all of that in here. You can also look at the data from the asset view or from different perspectives down here. So coming back to the top, I also want to quickly show the executive summary. If you're possibly following along in your Azure instance and you see different names here, maybe you see posture assessment instead, that's completely fine. That just means that you're looking at an older version of the workbook and you need to go in and update to the newer instance. So if we look at the executive summary and we scroll down, we still have the networking control family selected as earlier. This posture assessment is using Microsoft Defender for Cloud. We're evaluating all of the different areas of TIC and Zero Trust relative to this control family and getting that policy assessment of our assets. Here again, you can see the recommendations, that deep link directly into Defender for Cloud if you want to remediate. And if you scroll down a bit further, you can also see recommendations by asset. So you can try and understand perhaps which assets need the most help. And you can also see recommendations over time. So ideal world, this is a flat line. As we're deploying new resources, they're staying secure by default. Clearly, that's not the case. I probably deployed some new resources on July 6th that weren't secure. I had to come in and correct some misconfigurations the day after. But since then, this is a fairly solid trending line, and I'd like to try and keep that flat as much as I can over time. So this is the workbook, and again, that great dashboard visualization that will help you understand your posture relative to the Zero Trust framework. As I mentioned, we also have analytics rules. So let me make this a bit easier to read. So here we have the analytics rules that will alert you on if your posture has changed. So if we scroll down here, you'll see this runs every 7 days. If your threshold falls below 70%, meaning that you have failed to meet over 30% of the recommendations, we will send you an email, we will post on Teams, and just let you know exactly what has happened and what you need to remediate. This can be customized, so if you want to increase the frequency to daily or decrease it to bi-weekly, you can do all of that directly in the analytics rule. Finally, we also have the automation. So if we scroll down here, we have the ability to open a ticket, for example, in Azure DevOps. We can create an ADO item if we have a recommendation that needs to be addressed and we want to ticket that to the appropriate team. So when you go into Content Hub and you deploy the solution, you will get the workbook, the analytic rule, and the playbooks out of the box. So with that, I would recommend if you are using the solution to go back and make sure that it's updated. And if you haven't had a chance to check it out, please do and let us know your thoughts. We have a survey at the top of the portal. And as I mentioned, we read all of the feedback. Hopefully, again, you've seen some of your feedback integrated into the updated solution. So thank you for having me. I'm sure there are some questions that we can answer and looking forward to see how everyone continues to use this solution.
Great, thank you, Lily. We do have a few questions. First one is, what are the license requirements for Zero Trust?
Great, so for this solution, we have 2 prerequisites, and let me just quickly share the onboarding guide again, but we have Microsoft Sentinel, and Microsoft Defender for Cloud are the two prerequisites to getting this workbook going. Anything else is an enrichment. So again, if you're using third-party tooling or if you're using any other of our Microsoft suite, we'll also bring that in, but none of that is a requirement. And if you hit yes on the guide and you scroll down, you can see exactly how to do all of the onboarding requirements. So perhaps if you're not using Sentinel, we have a deep link to our docs page that will help you enable that. Great question.
Thank you. The next one we have is, it's nice that Vuln Info is included, but we need guidance about when to use this instead of Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Is one richer than the other, or are they identical?
Very good question. We are actually using the vulnerability assessment from Defender for Cloud. So no difference, same solution, just visibility in this workbook.
Great, thank you.
Great question.
Next one is, will we be able to pull that CVE data as a report that can be reviewed with clients and senior staff?
Yes, so great question. The entire workbook can be printed. You can print the whole thing to PDF that will include all of the notes that you've added, and that's a great way to share it with clients if you're an MSSP, to share it with decision makers, and we've built that in exactly with your use case in mind.
Great, thank you. Next question. Can the asset inventory logs be used for ingestion into ServiceNow CMDB, or are they accessible through API?
Yes, all of that can be configured. Once you deploy this, it is customer controlled content, and you can go ahead and do all of those third-party integrations that might be beneficial. And we're happy to help with specific use cases as needed.
Great, thank you. The next question is there a cost associated with ingesting data to the workbook in Sentinel, or is this ingestion free? Is the data ingested into the existing Sentinel workspace?
Great question. I'll answer from the end. Yes, existing Sentinel workspace. There is no additional cost to using this workbook.
Great, thank you. The next one is, when would you recommend to use this solution rather than the SOC process framework solution?
So this is the SOC process solution is not one that I'm super familiar with, so happy to chat about that a bit more offline, but this is really something that's Zero Trust specific. So if you're looking to better understand how your Microsoft and third-party ecosystem can meet and improve its posture relative to Zero Trust and TIC 3.0 principles, this is a great starting point.
Great. That seems to be all the questions we had. So I'd like to thank you, Lili, for being our guest today and for an excellent.
Actually, I would like to ask. Sorry to interrupt. There seems to be some questions related to the pushing these updates. Some of them are not seeing the updates, and perhaps they were wondering, will there be a manual update required or deployment for this new solution?
Yes. So if you've already deployed a version of the solution, you will need to do the manual update. When you go to the workbook in Sentinel, it should show orange if an update is required. When we send out the slides, we can include just a quick screenshot of how to do that so everyone has it for reference.
Great, thanks. Back to you, Jason.
Thanks, Val. Anyway, thank you, Lili, for being our guest today and for an excellent presentation. And thank you to the rest of the team who helped answer questions. At the same time, I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to visit our landing page at aka.ms/securitycommunity. And while there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content relevant to our security products and their communities. A good start would be browsing our bite-sized product videos, ninja trainings, recordings of webinars, GitHub communities, and more. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. Please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. Thank you and see you next time. Goodbye.